Good morning. So, what I'd like to share with you today, on this once again cold winter's day, is just a fact that the Torah mentions, and try and understand it in a little, in some way, because it's a little bit of a strange fact that that the Torah presents. So, the Torah tells us in Devarim, when it's going through all the different cities that were conquered by the Jewish people as they came from Mitzrayim. So this is on the Transjordan side, where Jordan is today. We call it Eva Yarden HaMizrachi, which is the area where Ruvain, Gad, and half the tribe of Menashe eventually settled down. And there, the Bnei Israel wanted just free passage. They wanted just to come through. They didn't want to attack or offend anybody, so they go to Sichon Melech HaEmori. They ask him, and he says absolutely no. And instead of letting them come through, what happens is that he comes and he attacks the Jewish people, and he's completely destroyed. So too, Og, who is the king of Bashan at that point in time, is the same thing, and he's completely destroyed. And the Torah then describes in Moshe's speech all the different cities that they conquered. It's been called Arei HaMishor, V'chol HaGil'ad, V'chol HaBashan, Ad Salka, Edra'i, Arei, Mamlechet Og HaBashan. All these cities and towns, the towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. And then the Torah goes on and describes what Og was. Why? Ki rak Og, only Og. Melech HaBashan, the king of Bashan, Nish'ar Miyesar Rephaim. There's something special about Og, that he was left from the Rephaim. We need to understand who the Rephaim are. He was the only one left of them. And then it describes something that's really strange. Barzel. His bed was made of iron. Halahu barabas b'nei Ammon. He was now in Rabat, of the Ammonim. Teisha amot archa v'arba amot rachba ba'amat ish. It's 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide by the amma of the cubit of a normal person. So somehow this bed, which was the bed of Og, kind of found itself in Rabat Bnei Ammon, in maybe it's a museum, we're not sure, of the Bnei Ammon, and it gives its measurements. So the question is, what is going on here? Why is the Torah telling me all these different things about this bed of Og? So Rashi tells us the following. Rashi says, what Yeter HaRephaim? Who are the Rephaim? That he says, Shehargu Amraphel v'chaverav ba'ashtarot karnaim. This is earlier on, the Torah tells us about Amraphel and all his friends, who in Ashtarot Karnaim destroyed a whole bunch of kings. And so this is Og, who was left over. V'hu palat min milchama. He ran away from the war. He managed to get out of it. And the Torah Shnei Mar, as it says, Vayavo hapalit ze'og. As the Torah tells us in Bereshit, that somebody, Vayavo hapalit, the palit, came to tell Avram. So what's going on here? Amraphel is one of the kings of there's 4 kings versus 5 kings in the story of Avram Avinu. And in that whole story, there's a lot of bloodshed and there's a lot of destruction. And one of the people that managed to get out of that is Og. And Og comes and he tells Avram Avinu what happened to Lot. Now, the way Rashi presents it there is that he told him in order to get that Avram would go and try and save Lot. And when he would try and save Lot, obviously, if the kings destroyed such powerful armies, they would destroy Abraham, and then he would be able to take Sarah. So that's Og. So according to Rashi is telling us he has this man who's not the most savory person in the world. We don't know much about him. We just know that is who he was. Comes along the other Mefarshim, and the other Mefarshim give us a little bit more information about exactly who this chap was. So comes along the Rabbeinu Bachaya, and he says, what does it mean Ba'amat Ish? Ba'amat Ish means that there was something very special, about this man. And the fact that he's called a melech, says the Rabbeinu Chaya, Mashe karu melech kadai l'ramoz al ikar yosodo harishon. The first thing is that the fact that he's called a king, he made himself into a king. He settled in this place called Bashan. He made himself into a king, is to come and to show to us that he comes from royalty. And what is this royalty? This royalty is B'nei HaElohim Sheyetzu Mikayin. If you remember, the Torah at the beginning of the Bereshit speaks about the B'nei HaElohim, which we translate as the children of the gods, the children of the ministers, and it's difficult to understand it there. We haven't got time to go through all of that. But comes along the Rabbeinu Bachai and tells us that Og comes from the mishpacha, from the family of those people of the Bnei Elohim, where they came from. Sheyatzu Mikayin. They came from Kain. They are Kain's descendants. And it doesn't want to tell us exactly where he comes from, so it just tells us that it is a melech. He says, hold on a second. Are you telling me that he is the descendant of Cain? How can it be a descendant of Cain? Cain and all his descendants, as with all the people, and the only person who survived was Noach and his 3 sons. And Noach was a descendant of Shem, not a descendant of Cain. So everyone got wiped out. So says the Rabbeinu Bachai, yes, everyone got wiped out. Except only Og. This guy, can you imagine how powerful he must have been? So first, he's very old. But also he's very, very powerful. He's a powerful physically, and he's powerful in the man that he is. Some of the Mefarshim explain that he was quite a grotesque-looking person because he was so big, but his limbs were a certain size. Like his body was enormous, but his limbs were the size of normal people's limbs. So he was quite grotesque and deformed, but he was very powerful to the extent that he becomes this king. And it describes this bed of his that was so enormous. The Migdavar, the Netziv, explains that what does it mean that his bed was so big? He says a mitzat katan mikri eres. He says actually, the bed of a child is called an eres. We call our beds a mitah. An eres is like a cot. He says that it was when was his eres an eres of barzel, of iron? It was even when he was a kid. Why was it iron? And there's a whole discussion amongst the Rishonim that he was so powerful, so big, and so strong that wood wouldn't hold him. He always sat on iron. He never sat on wood, which trying to understand, like why do the Rishonim have to bother about whether or not he sits on iron, whether or not he sits on wood. And perhaps we can say the following, is that the difference between wood and iron is that wood is wood grows. Wood grows, it's got life, it gives life, it's something very special. Whereas iron is very much indicative of a sword, of something that is cold, and something that is not life-giving, but rather life-taking. And perhaps that is what Og was all about, and what the Torah is trying to teach us, that he never, according to some of the Rishonim, never ever sat on wood because it would always break under him. Because life, natural, organic, was not the thing that Og connected into. He wasn't someone who nurtured in any way, shape, or form, but rather was a man who conquered in everything that he did. And so therefore, even his bed, even when he was a child, it's indicative of the fact that he is from that point of view. The Malbim tells us that that he was so enormous, right? That when he was a kid, a young child, he was so huge that he was 9 amot tall. And that was like the basic measurement from where he then grew up into. So he grew even bigger than that. The question really is what's going on that his bed is kept in some place in the Rabbat B'nai Ammon. It's not simple to understand, but it seems to be that it was such a deviation from anything of the norm that there was a society of the Ammonim that wanted to keep it there in order for them to be able to just marvel at the size and who this person was. The question really then has to be asked is, why is it that the Torah has to describe him in such an enormous way? And I think this goes back to what we said yesterday, and this is how the Mefarshim explained it, that ואמר הסיבה בזה כי הוא לרוב גבורתו ליוסף מן הרפאים, מה שלא היה סיחון. He was so powerful. Well, Sichon was just a king. Yeah, this Og was the last one of the Rephaim. He was the remaining one. It lived hundreds of years. He was a person who was so powerful. ואם לרשום גודל התשוע הזויס, מפאת שר הצבא שהיה הממונה על האויבים, שהיה Og הנשאר מיתר רפאים. One of the reasons why the Torah is telling us who this man was and how big he was and where he comes from is to show the incredible miracle of the defeat of Og Melech HaBashan. You know, we say it every Shabbos when we say Hodel Hashem Kitov Ki Lam Chazdoi, we say L'Sichon Melech HaMari Ki Lam Chazdoi, L'Og Melech HaBashan Ki Lam Chazdoi. We praise the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed his chesed in us being able to destroy Og. Why? Because he was so powerful that it was so almost impossible for anybody to defeat him. But comes along Bnei Israel, this small little group of people who are not the most powerful warriors in the world, who are not known to be warriors. They come 40 years in the desert. What they were doing in the desert, they were learning Torah. They weren't training in war, but nonetheless, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one that guides them in their fight, and because of that, the Bnei Israel are able to destroy Og Melech HaBashan, and that is indicative of the great miracle of the Teshua that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought in that words, and that's why the Malbim explains, he was completely supernatural in his size. And he says, but although, often we find that people who are a little bit disproportional, or not, that they have certain like diseases or what have you. For example, the tallest man in the world has certain bone issues. He says, but in that, this Og was so special in that he never had anything like that. The ratio of height to strength was exactly as it would be. So as he got bigger and stronger, so too, and he never lost that because there was nothing wrong with him on that level, according to the Malbim. And therefore he says that v'chol zeh mima sheyore al godel ateshua elokit asher asabi milchama, and that goes to show the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's role in a place. And I think that what that's really telling us, and what Moshe is really telling Bnei Israel, because that's really what this is about, is that he's telling Bnei Israel, don't forget, you're about to go into Eretz Israel. Remember, I'm teaching you values. The fundamental value of everything is that as you go into Eretz Israel, if we will connect properly with the Ribono Shel Olam and bring him in as our savior, then we don't have to worry, says Moshe Rabbeinu. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't even have to worry about Og. Og, he was the Nish'am Yeter Rephaim. He's one of the great descendants of Cain, who was a powerful man. Everything that we have to be scared of. All those things that Bnei Israel said they were scared of going into Eretz Israel, this man, Og, stands for all of that. The power, the strength, the way of instilling fear in everybody. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going into Eretz Israel, you don't have to fear. You don't have to fear at all, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on your side, as he was when we went into that thing. And when we went into that war. And then the Torah tells us that this space, v'yeter hagilad v'chol habashan mamlechet Og, natati lecha tishevet hamanashe kol chevel haragog v'chol habashanu yikarei eretz Rephaim. Says all this land was given to whom? To half the tribe of Manasseh. It's not even given to any huge people. It's a small little place. But this man, Og, was so powerful, he was so frightening that nobody wanted to come and try and defeat him. He created his little kingdom, and we, Bnei Israel, with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, were able to destroy that. And so Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to instill within the Bnei Israel this idea of not having fear. The Malbim explains that there are two types of fear. There's pachad and there's yira. Pachad is the fear of the unknown, and yira is the awe and reverence of that which you understand and which you know. And you can imagine Bnei Israel are about to go into Eretz Israel. They don't know anything. They don't know what it has to stand for them, number one. So that's a deep sense of pachad. And Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Bnei Israel that you have to remember that your yira has to trump your pachad. Your awe and the reverence of Hashem has to be the thing that will overpower the fear that you have of the unknown, knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on your side at all times. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Please, God.